Marcus Aurelius understood human nature better than almost anyone in history, and what he knew will change how you see every person you interact with, including yourself. Marcus Aurelius was the emperor of Rome. He dealt with millions of people across an empire: politicians, generals, advisors, citizens, enemies. And through all of it, he observed patterns in human behavior that he wrote down in his personal journal. These observations about human nature are brutally honest and uncomfortably accurate. He understood why people act the way they do, why they betray each other, why they're selfish and irrational, and why most people never change. And once you understand what he knew, you'll stop being surprised by people's behavior and start navigating the world with much more clarity. So, what did Marcus Aurelius know about human nature? First and most important, people are primarily concerned with themselves, not in a cruel way, just as a basic fact of existence. Everyone wakes up thinking about their own problems, their own goals, their own needs. They're not spending their day thinking about you. They're not considering how their actions affect you. They're navigating their own life, and you're just a small part of their peripheral awareness. Marcus wrote this down to remind himself not to expect people to be constantly thinking about his needs or the empire's needs. Even people close to him, even people who loved him, were primarily focused on themselves. This isn't a judgment. It's just how humans work. And once you understand this, you stop taking things personally. Someone doesn't respond to your message, they're not ignoring you, they're just focused on their own situation. Someone forgets something important to you, they're not being inconsiderate on purpose, you're just not as central to their thoughts as you are to your own. Here's where most people mess up. They expect others to care about things the way they care about things, to remember what matters to them, to prioritize their needs. But everyone is the main character in their own story, and you're just a supporting character in theirs. When you accept this reality, instead of fighting it, you stop being hurt by normal human self-focus. Second thing Marcus understood, people act according to what seems right to them in the moment, even when it's objectively wrong. Nobody thinks they're the villain. Everyone has a justification for their behavior that makes sense from their perspective. The person who betrayed you thought they had good reasons. The person who lied to you convinced themselves it was necessary. The person who hurt you believed they were justified. Marcus wrote that people do wrong because they're confused about what's good for them, not because they're evil. They pursue money thinking it will make them happy. They chase status thinking it will fulfill them. They act selfishly, thinking it serves their interests. They're not trying to be bad people. They're just mistaken about what actually leads to a good life. This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it explains it. When you understand this, you stop being shocked by people's choices. You see that they're operating from their own confused understanding of what's good. You can disagree with their actions without hating them as people. You can protect yourself from their behavior without carrying rage about their motives. Marcus dealt with betrayals and opposition constantly, but he rarely took it personally because he understood people were just acting according to their flawed understanding. Third insight. Most people will never change. Marcus observed the same patterns playing out over and over, people making the same mistakes, pursuing the same empty goals, falling into the same destructive patterns. He wrote about how rare it is to find someone who's actually working on themselves, who's questioning their assumptions, who's trying to grow. Most people just repeat their programming until they die. This is harsh but true. That person who keeps making the same bad decisions, they'll probably keep making them. That friend who's always in drama, they'll probably stay in drama. That family member who refuses to see their issues, they'll probably never see them. Expecting people to change when they've shown no interest in changing is just setting yourself up for disappointment. Marcus didn't expect people to become better versions of themselves unless they demonstrated actual commitment to growth. He worked with people as they were, not as he wished they would become. This allowed him to be effective without being constantly frustrated by others' lack of development. Fourth understanding, people are driven by fear more than anything else. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of not having enough, fear of being exposed, fear of change, fear of missing out. Most of human behavior can be explained by understanding what someone is afraid of. They're aggressive because they fear being weak. They're dishonest because they fear consequences. They're controlling because they fear uncertainty. Marcus wrote about how fear makes people irrational. It makes them act against their own interests. It makes them hurt others preemptively. It makes them cling to things that harm them. When you see someone's behavior through the lens of fear, it makes more sense. They're not trying to hurt you. They're trying to protect themselves from what they fear, and you're just collateral damage. This doesn't mean you accept harmful behavior. It means you understand it without taking it personally. That person who lied to you was probably afraid of your reaction. That person who betrayed you was probably afraid of losing something. Understanding their fear doesn't excuse the behavior, but it does remove the mystery and the personal sting. Fifth insight about human nature. People want to be right more than they want to be accurate. Marcus observed that people would rather maintain their current beliefs than discover they were wrong. They'll ignore evidence. They'll rationalize contradictions. They'll attack anyone who challenges their worldview, not because they're stupid, but because admitting you were wrong feels like losing, and people hate losing. He wrote about how pointless it is to argue with people who are committed to their position. They're not seeking truth. They're seeking validation of what they already believe. You can present perfect logic, and it won't matter because they're not evaluating your argument rationally. They're defending their identity, which is tied to being right. When you understand this, you stop wasting energy trying to convince people. You recognize when someone is open to new information versus when they're just defending their existing beliefs. You let go of the need to be right yourself because you see how that same drive makes others irrational. Sixth understanding, people are inconsistent and will contradict themselves constantly. Marcus noticed that people's values shift based on what's convenient. They claim to value honesty but lie when it benefits them. They say they care about fairness but make exceptions for themselves. They preach one thing and practice another without seeing the contradiction. This inconsistency isn't always hypocrisy. Often people genuinely don't see their contradictions. They compartmentalize. They have different standards for different situations. They believe their exceptions are justified while others aren't. Marcus stopped expecting consistency from people and instead observed what they actually did rather than what they said they valued. Watch people's actions, not their words. That's what Marcus did. Someone can tell you all day that you matter to them, but their actions show the truth. Someone can claim certain values, but their choices reveal their real priorities. When you focus on behavior patterns instead of stated intentions, you see people much more clearly. Seventh insight, people need to feel important and will act irrationally to maintain that feeling. Marcus observed that much of human conflict comes from people protecting their sense of importance. They can't admit mistakes because that would mean they're not as smart as they think. They can't apologize because that would mean they're not as right as they believe. They can't accept criticism because that would threaten their self-image. He wrote about how this need for importance makes people do absurd things. They'll destroy relationships to avoid admitting fault. They'll sabotage opportunities rather than risk looking incompetent. They'll create drama to feel significant. Understanding this drive explains so much behavior that otherwise seems crazy. When someone is being difficult, often they're just protecting their sense of importance. When you can give people ways to feel important without compromising yourself, interactions get easier. When you realize their resistance isn't about you, it's about them protecting their ego, you stop taking it personally. Here's what Marcus Aurelius really understood about human nature. People are flawed, self-focused, often irrational, driven by fear, and unlikely to change. This isn't pessimism, this is realism. And when you see people clearly instead of through fantasy about how they should be, you can work with reality instead of constantly fighting it. Marcus didn't hate people for being this way. He had compassion for the human condition while also protecting himself from its negative aspects. He wrote that we're all struggling with our own confusion about what's good, what's true, what's important. We're all operating from limited understanding and trying our best, even when our best is pretty flawed. This understanding gave him both patience and boundaries. Patience because he knew people were doing the best they could with their level of awareness. Boundaries because he knew not to expect more than people were capable of giving. He didn't take betrayals personally because he expected some people would betray him. He didn't expect honesty from everyone because he knew fear makes people lie. He didn't wait for people to change because he knew most wouldn't. Start applying what Marcus knew about human nature. Stop expecting people to think about you as much as you think about them. They're focused on themselves, and that's normal. Stop being shocked when people act according to their confused understanding of what's good. They're doing what makes sense to them, even if it's objectively wrong. Stop expecting people to change unless they demonstrate real commitment to growth. Accept them as they are or create distance, but don't waste energy waiting for transformation that's not coming. Understand that fear drives most behavior, and when you see someone's actions through that lens, they make more sense. Stop trying to convince people who are committed to being right. Watch what people do, not what they say, and recognize that everyone is protecting their sense of importance in various ways. When you understand these patterns, you navigate human relationships with much more skill and much less disappointment. Marcus Aurelius had to work with all kinds of people, brilliant and foolish, loyal and treacherous, wise and confused. He couldn't choose to only interact with ideal people. So he developed understanding of human nature that allowed him to be effective while protecting his peace. You can do the same. See people clearly, accept their limitations, protect yourself accordingly. Have compassion for the human struggle while maintaining boundaries. The world makes more sense when you understand human nature. People's behavior stops being mysterious or personal. You see the patterns, you understand the drives, you predict reactions, and you stop being hurt by normal human limitation while also not tolerating behavior that harms you.